Costello got to thinking about Tal and Spencer's relationship. His personal memories with them felt lodged in between pockets of his hippocampus. After watching the series, he experienced sparks that jogged some of them out, but he was never able to truly recollect what he did with them. He just knew whatever it was felt like a bond, and he sensed their love of one another. Not since Jenna had Costello felt such a closeness to anyone. No matter the circumstance behind Tal and Spencer's relationship, Costello was unable to stop thinking about what he saw between them. He didn't know Tal's wife in Kansas City. There was no history to Spencer that he could pivot to so he wouldn't focus on them together. It's all he knew. Costello could only assume he did everything wrong around them. It was one of his lower moments in life. Even though he was a caring and compassionate person in most cases, he found himself allowing the booze to navigate his bravado. Costello had a truly narrow bravado under most circumstances. But when he was drinking, that motherfucker was enigmatic and hefty. Reflecting on what the outcome was in Seattle, he would be sure to give people the respect and honor they deserved. One night in Seattle and maybe 2 hours of his life was all he had to reference. He often wondered about the time he spent with them while blacked out. Hundreds of blackouts, and this one shined the most. If only he knew more than the visions told him. Maybe Tal opened up to Costello about his family. Spencer could have told him about her secret lovers and what it was that drove her to her life she chose behind closed doors with her spirituality and the men she shared time with. He gasped mid-stride as he again had a realization about 7 years passing with no answers for the families of either Tal or Spencer. He was almost thankful he was told to watch the series and learn about their murders. Even he had moved so far past the entire incident, it wasn't a concern. Of course, all he really knew 7 years ago was he blacked out with strangers in Seattle and woke up with blood on his clothes. Fucking par for the course at the time, sadly. Costello started to work backwards over that 7-year period to see if he'd accomplished anything of value, if he gave the universe anything worthwhile during the time he was unaware about the deaths of these two people. The entire Jenna story was so large he was unable to see through it to anything else of value, especially now knowing what Avery told him. He could feel his legs tiring and his bike slowing. His entry into Calico wasn't turning out to be the showcase he was expecting. Suddenly, he wondered if he was going to make it at all. Costello looked up into the sky as the night began to steal the daylight. This was when so many people found their conversations with God. Costello didn't have that option. He pulled his bike over to the side of the road and stopped. Then he slowly pedaled back to the center of the highway once he noticed there were no cars in either direction. Ahead was just a glimmer of light left over from the day. He focused out across the road and waited. Just as he decided to get his head straight, get back to pedaling, a snake made its way out onto the highway. It parked itself right in the center of the road. That's when he realized something. He's always been a visitor. Costello was just a guest in the snake's home. If the snake could survive out here, he would surely make it through and complete his mission. So long as he honors the sanctity of the environment he's in, he will be welcomed and pass on without incident. Maybe this was why Seattle turned into such a shit show. He gallivanted around like he owned the fucking place. Not an ounce of respect for the people who hold it together as their home. Another lesson in life he wouldn't figure out until nearly being 40. As he aged, memories of Grants became so much more profound. He knew he was very privileged to have him in his life, but sometimes didn't pick up the cues his grandfather tossed in his path. Fortunately, Costello had a steel trap memory when sober, so he dipped into the database occasionally and dusted off some wisdom. Costello took a deep breath after watching the snake navigate its environment. He thought about how many others may be nested in this particular area and the risk of encountering any venomous slithering creatures. This tour is about cycling, not a survivalist mission. He reflected on a moment with Grands once at the track when a colony of bees were buzzing around everywhere. Costello was terrified. He'd never experienced anything like this. Every few minutes, a bee or two would fly around him. Grants told Costello to relax and let the bees mind their business, insisting they had no desire to sting Costello or anyone else for that matter. Costello sat statuesque, nearly holding his breath. The bees kept joining him no matter how hard he tried to manifest them leaving him alone. Then it happened. Just as he began to calm down, he got stung. He was furious with Grant. He felt deceived by the one man he trusted. Grant scooted over to Costello and pulled out his driver license. He told Costello to stay calm and allow him to remove the stinger. He slowly dragged the card along Costello's arm and the stinger popped out, venom sac intact. Before Costello could give Grant a piece of his mind, Grant said something he will never forget. "Young man, even when you know exactly what you're supposed to do, it doesn't always work out your way. But after today, you will forever appreciate what it feels like to not be stung." He decided to push his bike a little further tonight and find a safe landing zone to take in the clear night sky and some FaceTime with Avery. The feeling of not being bit was exhilarating, and he intended on keeping it that way. He jumped on a call with Avery to talk him through the extra miles. As the calico sky began to light up, he regained that high he was manifesting earlier. His first real awakening to the connection with the tour was happening, and he found himself reeling for the next chapter. Once he settled in at a motel, he topped off his caloric requirements and found a chair to cozy up with 1,000,000,000 stars in his time with Avery. It was dramatically later than anticipated with the change of plans, but Avery held up her end of the bargain, taking his FaceTime. Costello knew immediately she was tired, so he quickly panned his phone across the clear night sky to show her the pointillism created by the furious monsters of gas hidden behind the Los Angeles haze. He praised her for being such a great part of his life and saved her the grief of telling him she was tired by telling her himself. He was lying. He hadn't been so awake in days. It was simply the right thing to do. Something Costello planned on doing more of moving forward.